The Christmas morning my family left me behind, I thought my heart would never recover from what they had done. But I was wrong. Because that same Christmas morning became the moment I finally understood something I had been too afraid to admit for years. I was not losing my family. I was losing the illusion that they had ever truly valued me. It was 7:12 in the morning when I woke up. Snow covered the windows of our house, turning the world outside into something soft and peaceful. Christmas lights blinked across the living room, and the smell of cinnamon and coffee filled the hallway. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then I heard voices downstairs. My mother. My older sister, Claire. My younger brother, Daniel. And my stepfather, Richard. They were laughing. I smiled. I had spent weeks preparing for Christmas. I had bought gifts for everyone. I had prepared my mother's favorite dessert. I had even paid for most of the decorations because I wanted this Christmas to feel special. I got dressed quickly and went downstairs. "Good morning," I said. The room became strangely quiet. My mother looked at me. Then she looked away. Claire stopped smiling. Daniel suddenly became very interested in his phone. And Richard cleared his throat. I knew immediately that something was wrong. "What happened?" I asked. Nobody answered. Then my mother finally said, "We're leaving." I blinked. Leaving? For the Christmas trip. I stared at her. "What trip?" Claire sighed. "The trip we told you about." "No," I said quietly. "You never told me." Richard stood up and grabbed his coat. "We're going to the lake house." My stomach dropped. The lake house belonged to my mother's side of the family. It was almost 3 hours away, and we had spent Christmas there every year since I was a child. I looked at the bags near the front door. There were 4. 4 suitcases. 4 coats. 4 people. I counted them again. 4. "You aren't taking me." Nobody looked at me. My mother finally said, "It was complicated this year." Complicated. Claire crossed her arms. "Don't make this dramatic." I stared at her. I asked a question. She rolled her eyes. "We thought you'd be busy." "Busy doing what?" Silence. Then Richard said something that I would remember for the rest of my life. "You can stay here. You're old enough to take care of yourself." I felt like someone had quietly removed the floor beneath my feet. I looked at my mother. "Mom." She avoided my eyes. "I thought we were going together." She whispered, "I'm sorry." But her voice didn't sound sorry. It sounded relieved. And that hurt more than anything. I looked at the Christmas tree. Underneath, it were the gifts I had bought for everyone. My mother's package. Claire's package. Daniel's package. Richard's package. I had spent money I could barely afford because I believed family meant showing up for each other. Apparently, I had been the only one following that rule. Claire picked up her suitcase. "Don't ruin Christmas for everyone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm not ruining anything. You always make things uncomfortable." I stared at her. By asking why I'm being left behind. Nobody answered. Then my mother walked toward the door. I stepped aside. One by one, they walked past me. No hug. No explanation. No promise to call. Nothing. Just footsteps. The front door opened. Cold air rushed inside. And then they were gone. I stood there in the silence. The house suddenly felt enormous. The Christmas music continued playing. The lights continued blinking. The coffee was still warm. Everything looked exactly the same. Except I was completely alone. I sat on the couch and stared at the tree. For years, I had tried to keep this family together. I had forgiven them. I had covered for them. I had helped them financially when they needed it. I had celebrated their achievements. I had stayed quiet when they treated me differently. And on Christmas morning, they had finally shown me exactly where I stood. I was not part of the family trip. I was the person they were comfortable leaving behind. I wiped my eyes. Then I noticed something on the coffee table. An envelope. It had my name on it. I opened it. Inside was a short note from my mother. "We'll be back Sunday. Please don't invite anyone over, and don't touch anything in the upstairs office." I read it twice. Then a third time. The upstairs office. Why would she specifically mention that? I looked toward the staircase. For the first time that morning, my sadness was replaced by curiosity. What exactly were they hiding? And why had they been so desperate to make sure I stayed away from that room? I had no idea that the answer would change my entire understanding of my family. And I certainly had no idea that by the time they returned from the lake house, I would no longer be waiting for them. My name is Emily. And for most of my life, I had been the person in my family who was expected to understand everything. If my mother was stressed, I understood. If Claire needed money, I understood. If Daniel forgot something important, I understood. If Richard was angry, I stayed quiet. If someone hurt my feelings, I was told not to take it personally. But nobody ever seemed to ask whether I was okay. I was 29 years old, and I had spent most of those years trying to earn a place in a family that was supposed to love me without conditions. My biological father had died when I was 14. After that, everything changed. My mother eventually married Richard. He wasn't cruel. At least, not in the beginning. He was simply distant. He had 2 children of his own from a previous marriage, but they lived in another state. That left Claire and Daniel as the center of attention. Claire was the successful one. She had a great job, a beautiful apartment, and a talent for making every conversation about herself. Daniel was the charming one. Everyone forgave him because he was funny. And then there was me. I was the reliable one. The one who stayed. The one who helped. The one who didn't complain. For years, I thought being reliable was something to be proud of. Then I realized something painful. Sometimes people don't appreciate the person who always stays. They simply stop noticing that person is there. The Christmas incident wasn't the first time my family had made me feel unwanted. It was simply the first time I couldn't pretend anymore. 6 months earlier, Claire had asked me to help with her wedding. I had spent nearly every weekend helping her. I organized invitations. I called vendors. I helped choose decorations. I even paid a deposit when she said she was short on money. She promised to repay me. She never did. When I asked about it, she laughed. "Your family, why are you keeping score?" That sentence stayed with me. Because I wasn't keeping score. I was keeping track of how often I was expected to sacrifice, while everyone else was allowed to receive. A few months later, Daniel needed help with his car. I lent him money. He promised to pay me back. He didn't. When I reminded him, my mother told me, "Emily, family helps family." I wanted to ask, does family also help me? But I stayed quiet. That was my mistake. Silence teaches people how to treat you. And I had spent years teaching my family that they could do almost anything to me, and I would eventually forgive them. Christmas morning finally broke that pattern. After my family left, I sat alone for nearly an hour. Then I stood up. I looked at the gifts beneath the tree. For the first time, I didn't feel love when I looked at them. I felt foolish. I picked up my mother's gift. Then Claire's. Then Daniel's. I carried all of them into the spare room. I didn't throw them away. I simply put them out of sight. Then I made myself a cup of coffee. I opened my laptop. And I checked my bank account. I had $4,830 in savings. Not much, but enough for something I had been thinking about for years. I had always wanted to spend Christmas somewhere peaceful, somewhere nobody knew me, somewhere I didn't have to prove my worth. I opened a travel website. Then I remembered something. My grandmother. She had passed away 3 years earlier. Before she died, she had left me a small cabin in Vermont. It was an old place near a quiet lake. I hadn't visited it in almost 2 years because my mother always said it needed repairs. "Don't waste money on that old cabin," she would tell me. "One day we'll decide what to do with it." I had never questioned her. Why would I? She was my mother. But suddenly, I wondered, why had she always told me the cabin was practically worthless? I opened the documents my grandmother had left me. I had never looked at them carefully. I searched through the folder. And there it was. The property deed. My name. My grandmother had left the cabin directly to me. Not to my mother. Not to the family. Me. I stared at the document. Then I remembered something else. My mother had once told me that the cabin was in terrible condition and would probably cost more to repair than it was worth. But I remembered my grandmother saying something completely different. "It's a beautiful place, Amelie. One day you'll understand why I wanted you to have it." I suddenly felt a strange sense of excitement. Maybe Christmas wasn't ruined. Maybe Christmas had simply changed. I booked a ticket. I packed a small suitcase. Then I looked around the empty house. Before leaving, I left one note on the kitchen counter. It said, "Merry Christmas. I hope you enjoy your trip." Nothing more. No anger. No accusations. No explanation. Because I had decided something. I wasn't going to beg them to include me. I wasn't going to ask why they didn't love me. And I wasn't going to chase people who had already shown me where I stood. I was going to find out what my grandmother had left me. And for the first time in my life, I was going to choose myself. The drive to Vermont took almost 4 hours. The farther I got from home, the lighter I felt. The snow became heavier. The roads became quieter. And slowly, the noise inside my head began to disappear. By the time I reached the small town near the lake, it was almost dark. I stopped at a grocery store and bought enough food for several days. Then I drove another 20 minutes. Finally, I saw it. The cabin. It stood at the end of a narrow road, surrounded by tall pine trees. For a moment, I just sat in the car. I remembered being there as a child. My grandmother used to make hot chocolate while my father built fires in the fireplace. I remembered the smell of wood, the sound of snow hitting the roof, the way my grandmother would sit beside me and tell stories. I had forgotten how much I loved that place. I got out of the car. The key still worked. When I opened the door, dust filled the air. The cabin was cold, but it wasn't ruined. The furniture was old, but most of it was still in good condition. The fireplace worked. The electricity worked. The kitchen worked. It needed cleaning, but it was absolutely livable. I stood in the middle of the living room. Then I laughed. My mother had told me this place was practically falling apart. It wasn't. Not even close. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning. Then I made soup. I lit the fireplace. And for the first time in years, I sat down without feeling like I owed anyone anything. I opened an old box my grandmother had left in a closet. Inside were photographs, letters, Christmas cards, and a small leather notebook. I opened it. Most of the pages were filled with handwritten notes. At first, they were simple. Recipes, reminders, memories. Then I found something that made my heart stop. A note dated 6 months before my grandmother died. Amelie, if you are reading this, please remember that you never need to earn your place in this family. You already have one. And if anyone ever tries to convince you otherwise, look at the documents in the blue box. I stared at the words. The blue box. I searched the cabin. After nearly 20 minutes, I found it hidden behind a stack of books. Inside were legal documents, bank statements, property records, and something else. A letter. My grandmother had written it specifically for me. I unfolded it. My dear Amelie, there are things I have not been able to tell you because I wanted to protect you from unnecessary conflict. Your mother has asked me several times about the cabin. She believes it should eventually belong to the entire family. I have always disagreed. This property is yours. I also placed money in a trust for you. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to give you a fresh start if you ever need one. Please don't allow anyone to make you feel guilty for accepting what I chose to give you. Love, Grandma. I read the letter again. Then I opened the bank statement. My hands began to shake. The trust wasn't small. My grandmother had invested carefully for years. The account had grown. There was enough money to pay off my debts, renovate the cabin, and still leave me with substantial savings. But that wasn't even the biggest surprise. There was another document. A property appraisal. The cabin and surrounding land were worth far more than my mother had ever told me. Almost 4 times what I had believed. I sat down. Suddenly, everything made sense. The way my mother always dismissed the cabin. The way she avoided letting me visit. The way she had once suggested selling it and splitting whatever little money came from it. She had known. She had always known. My family hadn't simply left me behind on Christmas. They had left me behind while they were discussing something that belonged to me. I looked at the documents again. Then I noticed a date. December 23. 2 days earlier. There was a meeting scheduled with a real estate company. The property listed. My cabin. My hands went cold. They hadn't just planned a Christmas trip. They had planned to sell my property. Without me. I leaned back and closed my eyes. For years, I had wondered whether I was imagining the way my family treated me. Now I had proof. They had planned everything. And Christmas morning was only part of it. I picked up my phone. There were no missed calls. No messages asking if I had arrived safely. Nothing. So I didn't call them. Instead, I made a decision. I would not confront them yet. Not until I knew everything. Because if they were willing to betray me over property, I needed to know what else they had been hiding. The next morning, I called an attorney in the nearest town. I explained the situation. She reviewed the documents and asked me to send copies. After several hours, she called me back. Amelie, I need you to understand something. Okay. The cabin is legally yours. I closed my eyes. I thought it was. It is. Your mother cannot sell it without your authorization. What about the meeting with the real estate company? If they were planning to sell it without your knowledge, that's a serious problem. I swallowed. What should I do? Don't confront anyone yet. That sentence sounded familiar. My grandmother had said almost the same thing. Gather everything, the attorney continued. Bank records, emails, messages, any documents they may have used. I thanked her. Then I began looking. I checked my old email account. There were messages I had ignored over the years. Messages from my mother. Messages from a financial advisor. Messages from a real estate company. And one email that shocked me. It had been sent almost a year earlier. Subject: Amelie's property, next steps. I opened it. My mother had been discussing the cabin with a real estate agent. She had written, Amelie is emotionally attached to the property, but she doesn't understand its value. If we can convince her to sell, we can use the money to resolve several family financial problems. I stared at the screen. Several family financial problems. Not mine. The next email was worse. Richard had replied, "She'll eventually agree. She always does when we make her feel responsible." I read that sentence several times. They knew exactly how to manipulate me. They knew guilt worked. They knew I wanted to keep peace. They knew I would sacrifice myself to avoid conflict. And they had planned to use that against me. Then I found something else. A spreadsheet. It contained names, amounts, debts, and projected money from the sale of the cabin. My name was listed at the top, under expected contribution. My family had already divided money they didn't own. Chloe was supposed to use her share to pay off wedding debt. Daniel was supposed to buy a new car. Richard and my mother were supposed to pay down their mortgage. And me. My share was listed as future support for family. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that happens when something is so unbelievable that your brain doesn't know what else to do. They had planned to use my inheritance to fix their lives. And they had apparently decided I didn't deserve to know. I saved copies of everything. Then I called my attorney again. She told me not to delete anything. Let them believe you don't know. Those words changed everything. For the first time, I understood that revenge didn't have to be loud. It didn't have to be cruel. Sometimes revenge was simply refusing to participate in your own betrayal. I decided to let them continue, believing I was the same Amelie. The quiet daughter. The forgiving sister. The woman who would eventually say yes. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Not after Christmas morning. Meanwhile, my family believed everything was going according to plan. I knew because Claire posted pictures online. There they were, standing beside the frozen lake, smiling, holding wine glasses, opening presents. One picture showed my mother laughing beside a Christmas tree. Another showed Daniel holding a gift. Then I saw Claire's caption, "Best Christmas ever, family is everything." I stared at those words. Family is everything. I almost cried. Then I smiled. Because for the first time, their words no longer had power over me. I wasn't angry that they were happy. I was simply finished pretending that I belonged in a picture they had already cropped me out of. That evening, I received a message from my mother. "Hope you're okay. We're having a wonderful time." I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, "I'm doing fine. Enjoy your Christmas." She responded almost immediately. "Good, we'll talk when we get home." I stared at the message. She didn't ask where I was. She didn't ask if I had eaten. She didn't ask whether I was alone. She simply assumed I was sitting in the empty house waiting for them. That assumption gave me an idea. I took a picture. Not of myself. Not of the cabin. Just the fireplace. The Christmas tree. A cup of hot chocolate. I posted it publicly with one sentence. Sometimes the best Christmas gift is finally finding peace. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't mention my family. Within an hour, Claire saw it. She sent me a message. "Where are you?" I didn't answer. Another message. "Emily, seriously, where are you?" I still didn't answer. Then my mother called. I let it ring. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for ignoring my family. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls. And then I saw a message from Richard. "We need to talk about the cabin." I stared at the screen. So they knew. Or at least they suspected. I smiled. They had spent years assuming they controlled the conversation. Now they were afraid I had learned the truth. I called my attorney. She said, "Don't go home yet." "Okay. Let them come to you." That was exactly what happened. My family returned 2 days later. I knew because my mother called 17 times. I finally answered. "Hello. Emily, where are you?" "Why?" "Because we've been trying to reach you." "I've been busy." There was a pause. "Where?" I smiled. "I'm on vacation." My mother became quiet. "Vacation where?" "I'll tell you when I get back." "Emily, this isn't funny." "I agree." She took a breath. "We need to discuss something." "The cabin." Silence. That silence told me everything. Finally, she said, "How did you know?" I leaned back in my chair. "Know what?" "Don't play games." "I'm not." "You know about the property?" "Yes." Another silence. Then she said, "We were going to explain." "When?" "After Christmas." "So you left me behind on Christmas morning so you could discuss selling my property." "That's not what happened." "It is exactly what happened." Richard got on the phone. "Emily, you're misunderstanding." "No. You don't understand the financial situation." "I understand it perfectly. You have no idea what your mother and I have been dealing with. And somehow, my inheritance was supposed to fix it." Nobody spoke. I continued. "You plan to sell property that belongs to me. We were trying to help you." "Help me?" "Yes. By hiding it." Richard's voice became tense. "We assumed you would agree. Because you thought I would feel guilty." Silence. I had finally said the words. Nobody could deny them. Then Claire joined the call. "You're being selfish." I laughed softly. "Selfish?" "Yes. You went on a Christmas vacation without me." "That's different." "How?" "You weren't invited." "Exactly." There it was. No excuse. No explanation. Just the truth. I took a breath. I'm not angry anymore. My mother sounded confused. "What?" "I'm not angry." "Then why are you acting like this?" "Because I'm done." "Done with what?" "Being the person you call when you need something." Nobody spoke. I continued. "You don't have to worry about the cabin." "What does that mean?" "It means you won't be selling it." My mother immediately became defensive. "Emily, please don't make a decision you'll regret." "I already made it." "What are you going to do?" I looked around the cabin. At the fireplace. At my grandmother's photographs. At the lake outside. "I'm keeping it." Richard laughed. "You can't afford the maintenance." "I can." "You don't know what you're doing." "I have an attorney." Silence. Then Claire said something that changed the entire conversation. "You wouldn't dare." I smiled. "That's the problem, Claire." "What?" "You still think you know me." I ended the call. And for the first time, I felt no fear. The next week was the hardest and most peaceful week of my life. I worked with my attorney. We updated the property records. We changed the locks. We secured the financial documents. And I began renovating the cabin. I didn't do it to impress anyone. I did it because I wanted to create a place where I could finally breathe. My grandmother's old kitchen became bright and warm. I repaired the fireplace. I restored the wooden floors. I cleaned every room. I framed her photographs. Then I found one final envelope hidden beneath the floorboard near the fireplace. Inside was a letter. This one was different. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my mother. I hesitated, but I opened it. My grandmother had written, I know you believe Emily is too soft to stand on her own. You are wrong. She has always been stronger than you realize. Do not confuse kindness with weakness. One day, she will stop asking for permission to live her own life. When that day comes, don't blame her. Ask yourself why she had to leave before you learned to appreciate her. I sat there for a long time. Then I cried. Not because the letter hurt. Because it was the first time someone had understood me completely. My grandmother had seen everything. Even when I couldn't. That night, I decided to host Christmas again. Not for my family. For myself. I invited people from the town. An elderly couple who lived nearby. A single mother I had met at the grocery store. A retired teacher. The attorney who had helped me. And several neighbors. People who had no reason to pretend to love me. People who simply showed up. We decorated the cabin. We cooked. We laughed. We exchanged small gifts. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was real. Then, at around 8 in the evening, there was a knock on the door. I opened it. My mother stood outside. Behind her were Claire, Daniel, and Richard. They had driven 4 hours. Nobody said anything. Finally, my mother whispered, "Merry Christmas." I looked behind them. There was snow falling. Their faces were tired. But what caught my attention wasn't their exhaustion. It was the expression on Claire's face. She was staring into the cabin. At the decorations. At the people. At the warmth. And I realized something. They had expected me to be sitting alone. They had expected me to be broken. Instead, I was surrounded by people who actually wanted me there. My mother looked at me. "Can we come in?" I stepped aside. Of course. They entered. Nobody spoke. Then my mother saw the framed photograph of my grandmother. She walked toward it. Her face changed. "What did you do to this place?" I restored it. "You did all this?" "Yes." Claire looked around. "How?" I smiled. "With my own money." Richard suddenly noticed the documents on the table. He looked at them, then at me. "You changed the ownership records." I confirmed them. He swallowed. "So the cabin is officially mine." Claire looked shocked. My mother sat down. For the first time in my life, I saw uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't looking at the daughter who always agreed anymore. She was looking at someone she no longer knew how to control. Then something unexpected happened. My mother began to cry. My mother didn't cry often. Not in front of us. She was always the strong one. The one who told everyone else to stay calm. But that night, she covered her face and cried. "I made a mistake," she whispered. I didn't respond. She looked at me. I thought I was protecting the family. I said, "You were protecting yourself." She lowered her eyes. "Maybe." Claire looked uncomfortable. Daniel stayed silent. Richard stared at the floor. My mother continued. "I convinced myself that because you were responsible, you could handle it." I said nothing. "But that's not an excuse." "No," I said. She nodded. "I know." For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Claire said, "We didn't think you'd actually leave." I looked at her. "I didn't leave." She frowned. "What?" "I stopped chasing you." Those words silenced the room. I continued. "There's a difference." Claire looked away. Daniel finally spoke. I knew the cabin was valuable. I looked at him. He sighed. "Mom told me." My chest tightened. "So you all knew?" He nodded. I didn't think it would go this far. I looked around the room. That's what everyone says after they get caught. Nobody argued. because they knew I was right. Then Richard said, "We came here to apologize." I nodded. "Okay." He looked surprised. "That's it. What do you want me to say?" "We want you to forgive us." I took a slow breath. Forgiveness isn't the same as trust. My mother nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" She looked at me. "I think I'm finally starting to." I looked at the people sitting around the cabin. The people my family had never met. People who had spent Christmas with me because they wanted to. Then I said something I had wanted to say for years. "I don't need you to make me feel like family anymore." My mother's eyes filled with tears again. "I want a family." "I know, but I don't want the old version." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I don't want a family where one person sacrifices and everyone else benefits." She nodded slowly. "I don't either." That night, we talked for hours. Not about money. Not about the cabin. Not about Christmas. We talked about everything we had avoided for years. My mother admitted she had treated me differently because she believed I was stronger than Claire and Daniel. Claire admitted she had been jealous of me. Daniel admitted he had taken my help for granted. Richard admitted he had allowed the situation to continue because it benefited him. None of their apologies erased what happened. But they were honest. And honesty was something I hadn't received from them in a long time. Before they left, my mother hugged me. I allowed her to. But I didn't pretend everything was fixed. Some wounds don't disappear because someone says sorry. They heal slowly. With time. With changed behavior. With boundaries. And most importantly, with respect. A year later, Christmas came again. This time, I wasn't afraid. The cabin was completely renovated. I had turned one side of it into a small guest space. I also started a community holiday dinner for people who didn't have anywhere to go. That tradition became more important to me than any family celebration. Because I learned something that year. Family isn't always about who shares your last name. Sometimes family is the person who notices you're alone and sits beside you. The person who checks whether you've eaten. The person who doesn't ask what they can get from you before asking how you're doing. And sometimes, family is something you build after the people you were born with disappoint you. My mother eventually became part of my life again. But differently. She didn't have access to my finances. She didn't make decisions for me. She didn't tell me what I should do. Claire and I slowly rebuilt our relationship. It took time. Daniel apologized more than once. Richard stayed distant for a while, but eventually he admitted that he had been wrong. Nobody became perfect. Neither did I. But I became stronger. Not colder. There is a difference. I still loved my family. I simply stopped allowing love to become an excuse for disrespect. And every Christmas after that, I remembered the morning they left me behind. At first, the memory hurt. Then it became a reminder. Because that was the morning I stopped waiting for someone else to choose me. I chose myself. And that changed everything. There was one final moment I will never forget. 2 years after that Christmas, my family came back to the cabin. This time, nobody was hiding anything. My mother brought food. Claire brought decorations. Daniel brought a ridiculous Christmas sweater that made everyone laugh. Richard carried firewood. They walked into the cabin like guests who were grateful to be invited. And I realized how much had changed. My mother looked around and smiled. "Your grandmother would have loved this." I smiled. "I think she would." Then my mother said, "You know something?" "What?" "We thought leaving you behind would teach you a lesson." I laughed. "I remember." She shook her head. "But you taught us one instead." I looked at her. What lesson? She smiled sadly. That you can't abandon someone and expect them to wait forever. I didn't answer, because there was nothing left to say. Outside, snow began falling. Inside, the fire crackled. The cabin was warm. The table was full. People were laughing. And for the first time, Christmas didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I was allowed to enjoy. I looked at the window. For years, I had thought being left behind was the worst thing my family could do to me. I was wrong. Being left behind was the beginning of my freedom. Because sometimes life removes people from your path before you are brave enough to walk away yourself. Sometimes rejection is actually redirection. Sometimes the door that closes behind you is the door that finally forces you to look at the one opening in front of you. And sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't making people suffer. It's building a life they can no longer control. My family left me alone on Christmas morning. They thought I would spend the holidays feeling unwanted. Instead, I found my grandmother's gift. I found my own strength. I found peace. And most importantly, I found myself. So if you're listening to this story, and you've ever been made to feel like you're not important, remember this. You don't have to beg people to value you. You don't have to keep proving that you deserve a place at the table. And you don't have to destroy yourself trying to keep people who are comfortable losing you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing. Sometimes the best response is to walk away. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living so peacefully that the people who underestimated you finally realize what they lost. That Christmas morning, my family left me behind. But they didn't realize something. They weren't leaving me behind. They were setting me free.